Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome back to Canard Boulevard. Today is another Q&A video. I have collected questions from various videos that you have posted on there, and boy, have you put a lot of questions on my videos. And I'm going to try to cover all of those, or at least a selection of those today. Coming up. Okay, yes, I am not in my hangar. I'm in front of a green screen, but it's 10 degrees outside. It has been for the last week, and for that reason I have not done much work at all. The magneto that I took off is still off, getting its, well, we'll talk about that more in one of the questions, but it's getting worked on right now. I have not started work on my electronic ignition. Simply, it's too cold to work in the hangar. My fingers don't work when it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is minus 12 Celsius, thereabouts. Too cold to work. I have pulled the upper cowl off. I'm doing a little bit of rework. If you remember last year when I put the heat shroud in there, I cut a hole in the cowling in order to adjust because I needed some extra clearance. And I did that in the hangar, and I glassed it in the hangar and put some micro on there and painted it and said, yep, good enough for now. I'll deal with that later. Well, later is now, so I'm taking the paint off. I'm going to re-micro it, smooth it, contour it, repaint it. That'll be good. All right, on with the first question. What is the aircraft's history? When was it built? Where was it built? How many owners has it had? And so on. It has had one owner. I bought it from the original builder. His name is Daryl. He is in Racine, Wisconsin. If you saw the very first video on this channel, you will see me going out there to actually pick it up. He and his wife built the airplane over about 10 years with help from their kids and his father, and lots of people had a hand in building the airplane. He flew it for about 20 years, and then he's decided he's going to build an RV, so he sold the Cozy to me, and he is getting close on his RV. He's still waiting on an engine. Every time I see him, it seems like more of an airplane and less of a collection of parts. So it's getting pretty close to being ready to fly as soon as he gets an engine. All right, next question. How often do you use all four seats? Is the aircraft practical four-seater, or is the space behind the front seats better used for just luggage? I have not had four people. I've had three people in the plane. I have not had four yet. Daryl, I know when he had the airplane, he had four people in the plane many times. It's more than capable of carrying four people. You can carry four people, not heavy people, but four adults of reasonable weight and full fuel in a Cozy. You will be heavy, you'll be very close to max gross weight, but there are not many airplanes that are a four-seat airplane that you can carry four adults and full fuel. This is one of them. So if you have less than four, obviously the airplane is lighter than max gross weight, so it's easier and safer to fly. So yes, you can fly four people in there. The back seats are reasonably roomy. The Cozy Mark III had one seat in the back, so the Mark IV was widened so you could get two seats back there. I primarily use the back seat just to carry luggage and crap. In fact, the seat behind me, I've got the footwell, the foot area, I've got all kinds of stuff down in there, and I will put bags and things in there if I'm traveling just to even out the weight. It's definitely usable as seats if you want. The one limitation of the Cozy is luggage space. There is no luggage compartment in the airplane. There are areas in the strakes, so when my wife and I will go, I will put one bag in the seat up front next to me, and then she'll sit in the back, and then the other seat is where we'll put bags. If you have four people, you are pretty limited in how much luggage you can carry or cargo. Some people have created cargo pods that hang off the wings that you can take apart and stuff full of duffel bags and things. And you can carry a fair amount, but keep in mind that's weight, so you can only carry so much weight. So yes, you could stuff things in there that maybe clothes and things that don't weigh a whole lot, but it still affects your overall weight. But it does give you a little more physical space to put stuff. Do you ever wish you had a conventional aircraft like an RV6, RV7, RV9, RV10, RV14? I don't know why they picked just RVs, but okay. There are occasions, primarily when I am flying into, or while I want to fly somewhere where there is a short runway. And I'll look at it and I'm like, no, I can't get in there. So there are airports like that where like, oh, I'd like to go there, but I'm gonna have to find an airport that has a longer runway because I can't get in there. There are some that are grass strips That's more common. Well, I guess there are quite a few up here, but you see a lot of them down south in Florida and in the Georgia area where they have just grass strips. And that's obviously not going to happen with a Cozy. So on those cases, it would be nice, but I haven't had to restrict myself in terms of where I'm going because of that. So for the most part, no, I don't really wish that I had a conventional aircraft. I'm pretty happy with this one. Do you fly Microsoft Flight Simulator? And if you do you have your airplane in it? No, I don't. I do have X-Plane. So X-Plane is like a competitor to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I don't really play video games at all, never have. However, I do have X-Plane, and the reason I have X-Plane is because it's good for practicing instrument approaches. You have the instrumentation, and you can hook up. I got my iPad with running Garmin Pilot. I can connect to the computer, so it's actually working as if I had it in the airplane. And then I can go and just practice instrument approaches. They're not. You can't log it as practice approaches, but it's still the experience of doing the approach. You can do things like throwing weather at you, and maybe you lose, maybe you lose your glide slope, and you can do stuff like that to just challenge yourself and just keep your head in the game, so that when you do it in the real thing in the airplane, it's familiar because you keep doing it and practicing it on the computer. So, and do I have my airplane in it? Yes. When I got X-Plane, I looked and I did see that somebody had created a Cozy Mark IV model in there. And I thought, oh, cool. So I loaded it in there and tried flying it. I'm like, whoa, this is so far from realistic. It climbed like double the climb rate that a real Cozy does. When you tried to stall it, it just like pointed the nose up and kept climbing. And there was I think it was extremely sensitive in roll. I don't know. There was quite a few different things in the model. So there was a message board, and the guy who actually created this model was in there, and I said, hey, I actually have one of these. Would you mind, do you want some suggestions on how you can improve it? So he actually took the suggestions I gave him and implemented them into the model. And then as a total surprise, he actually took, I guess he found out, I said, here's my YouTube channel, and he went there and saw my airplane, and he took his model and then modeled it after my airplane. So if you go into X-Plane now and you select that Cozy Mark IV, you'll actually see my airplane with the paint and the N number and everything on there. So you actually fly. The cockpit is not the same, but the outside appearance is. So that's pretty cool. Do you intend to add any new mods to your plane? I'm thinking of gear leg fairings, nose gear cowling, etc. Yes, I do. One of them, gear leg fairings, actually, that is a good guess, because I'm actually planning to do that this spring. I'm not going to do it in the winter because it's too cold to do glass work in the hangar, but once it warms up a bit. So if you look at the gear legs where it comes up in, actually, let me get my model. So if you look at where the gear legs go in the fuselage, it's just like a right angle. And anytime you have a right angle like that, particularly on the oncoming, but also on the surface there, it creates drag. I'm going to fair that in and give it a gradual slope all the way around there. And I might pick up a knot or two, maybe, on the gear leg fairings. You mentioned the nose gear cowling. No, I'm not going to modify the nose gear at all. The nose gear does retract, and there's a hole where the wheel is still visible. The actual strut itself is faired in, so it's flat and it is even with the fuselage. Where the wheel is, there's actually a hole. There are people that put doors on there so the doors close over the wheel. I could do that, but the actual gain from that is negligible. So it's really for appearance only, so I don't care. The other thing I'm going to do that I have planned to do for this winter, I'm going to take off the lower cowl and bring it back here like I did with the upper cowl. And if you look at mine, it actually has a lump as it comes out here, and there's a lump because that's where the air box and the throttle body is for the fuel injection. And as a result, the airflow comes along here, and then there's a sudden lump, and then there's going to be airflow separation behind that. and that separation then creates turbulence, which then goes directly into the prop and reduces the efficiency of the prop. So not only does it create drag and turbulence, it's decreasing how efficient the prop is. So I am going to change that so that it actually, it's more flat coming out there, and then it tapers like a boat tail laterally to gradually smooth that airflow together to A, reduce that drag, and then B, reduce the turbulence going into the prop. And I'm hoping that'll be good for another knot or two in terms of drag reduction and potentially also an increase in the efficiency of the prop. So that is planned for this winter. Can you increase the front seat weight limitation by adding weight behind the CG to balance it out? Technically, yes, you could do that. And they're talking about that I have a 400-ish pound limitation on the front seats for passenger weight, because that any further than that, it'll actually be out of CG. So yes, CG is just a balance, and the wheels and the spar, the main wing spar, are pretty much the balance. And so if I have extra weight here, could I add extra weight behind here to balance it out and increase the amount that I could carry up here? Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. So I could take a lead weight and hang it on the back of the engine. That would mean I would have more capacity to carry more weight up here. But do I want to do that? No, because that's just extra weight, which means you're extra drag, extra fuel burn. And so the idea is to keep the airplane as light as possible. I don't really foresee carrying more than 400 pounds in my front seats, so I don't really have a need to do that. And also, that means if you're flying solo, you need way more extra ballast, lead weight up in the nose, to balance all that extra ballast that you put in the back. So now you've not only got extra weight here, but you got extra weight up here, which means more drag here, less speed, more fuel. So it's not a good solution. The better solution is to go on a diet so you don't have to carry 400 pounds in your front seats. Can you use both rudders to slow down in the Cozy? Yes, you can. Each rudder pedal is connected directly to each individual rudder, and they go outwards like that when you press them. So if you press both rudder pedals, they both come out like that. And yes, you can use those as a makeshift speed brake. It doesn't do a huge amount because the rudders are only about that big, but it does make a difference. You can feel it, and it does slow you down, increases your descent rate without speeding up. So it's definitely useful on short final, and if you watch my videos, you will see me doing that. Well, I do it pretty much every time, but I sometimes mention it as well. A couple things I've had to learn and make sure that I get in my head is that you get off those rudder pedals before you actually touch down. There's been a couple times where I had the rudder pedals in, and I'll typically carry them all the way right down to touchdown and then let up off the rudder pedals before you actually touch the mains to the ground. But there's been a couple times where I got distracted or busy and I ended up actually landing with the rudders out, which also means your brakes are on if you're pushing hard into them. And of course, when you land with the brakes on, it's violent. So don't do that. The other thing that I learned rather in an exciting way is that at lower speeds, particularly your approach speeds, your ailerons are limited in effectiveness because they're great at cruise speeds. At lower speed, they're a little less effective because it's always a balance. If you made ailerons large enough that they were very effective at low speeds, now at high speeds it's going to be so sensitive that in roll that you don't really want to fly it. So it's always a compromise. In one case, came into an airport where there was a very stiff crosswind and it was very gusty, and I was holding the rudders on as a speed brake, and there was a gust of wind and it started rolling me to the right. And so I countered with left aileron, but it kept rolling to the right and kept rolling, and I was at full lock, full left aileron, and I was not arresting that roll because of it was almost like wind shear, not quite, but it was a gust and I suddenly realized, oh, I need to get my feet in the game here, because as anyone who flies knows that your rudder and your ailerons are kind of not interconnected. In some airplanes they are. Because I realized I was still rolling and I was looking and seeing that my wing was getting closer and closer to the ground, and I was not arresting that roll. So what I did was I let up on the right rudder, so I was having only left rudder, and that immediately popped that wing back up, and I was able to regain control and continue the approach down onto the runway. So a couple things you have to keep in mind when using your rudders in that way is that, hey, they are still controlled surfaces. You need to be using them as part of your approach. Are the building plans available for the Cozy still? Yes, they are. So the Cozy was developed by Nat Puffer. In fact, Daryl, the original builder of my airplane, helped Nat at Oshkosh. He manned the Cozy desk or booth at Oshkosh for a number of years for Nat. After Nat retired and passed on, the rights to the Cozy were bought by Aircraft Spruce. They sell the plans. The plans look like this. This is the box that they come in, and it looks like this. There's a whole bunch of books like this. There's two books like this, and you can see there's all the instructions, and that's your Cozy plans. If I remember correctly, it's about $500 for a set of plans, and that gets you includes the license to build it. I think you can buy a duplicate set of plans that do not include a license, I think, that are less, but you have to talk to Aircraft Service about that. And yes, they do have a lot of the parts that you need in order to build the Cozy as well. Oh, this is from Woody. He just wrote this one today. Why are you putting your poor wife in the back seat? Too close for comfort in the front, or a CG thing? Well, I have to say it's a little nicer. Oh my God, I can't let her see this video. It's nicer having her in the back because she's not complaining up front. But no, she actually chooses to go in the back. She prefers it. She's been up front for a couple of flights, and I did get her to actually fly it once. I have that video recorded, but I decided not to turn it into a video because she was complaining a fair bit, and I'm like, this makes her sound really not too pleasant. And so I decided that was not going to make it see the light of day. But she did get up there, and I let her fly it, and she did some turns and things, and she thought it was interesting, but she doesn't really like airplanes. She doesn't like aviation. The only thing she really likes about airplanes is that it takes her places. So she just wants to sit somewhere and enjoy the ride. And so she sits in the back. She can stretch out and spread out all her crap everywhere. And she has her phone set up, and she downloads a bunch of Netflix videos and watches movies back there and does whatever she does back there. And she's happy. That's how she wants it. So that's why I don't put her back there. It's not because of CG or anything else. In fact, if she was up front, I could take the lead ballast out of the nose, and that would make it a little more efficient and better. But anyway, so that's the reason why. It's her preference. This is a question that came on the recent video I did about, actually my last video about the maintenance. Do you have to overhaul the magneto regularly, or is there a known defect? No, it's called an IRAN, so it's inspect and repair is necessary. It's every 500 hours for this magneto. There's probably nothing wrong with it. It might be the points need to be adjusted. It is a mechanical device. It does wear out. There are parts in it that could crack, so they basically go over it, make sure everything is to spec, and if there's anything that's cracked or broken or out of spec, it gets replaced and put back together, and then it's good for another 500 hours. What is the shortest runway length that you would land confidently, assuming no obstacles? How many times have you had to go around because it floats into the runway too much? Two separate questions. The first one, shortest runway length, I like to say 2,500 feet is my limit. I can easily get the airplane, if it's just me in the airplane, and I don't have to carry extra speed because of gusty winds or so on, I can easily get it stopped in 1,500 feet, and I can take off in about the same amount. But I say 2,500 because that's a 1,000-foot margin of error. If there are obstacles, then of course that's going to go up. 2,500 is really my limit. I did that recently at the airport in Brampton. I think you may have seen that, where I flew with my father. Our short north-south runway at home here in Ohio is 2,700-ish feet, and that's fine. But I definitely pay attention going in and out of that runway. It does have obstacles. It does have a displaced threshold. So if it was an emergency and I need somewhere to land, anywhere to land, and the only thing down there is an 1,800-foot runway, I'm going for it. And I should be able to get on there and get stopped. I got to really be on my A game to do that, but it's technically possible. How many times have you had to go around because it floats on the runway too much? It happens. I don't know if I've counted the number of times, but I've definitely done it. I've definitely come in too fast, or forgot my landing brake, or just wasn't paying attention and came in too high, and that translates to too much speed, and now I'm floating. It does float if you have too much speed. It doesn't like to slow down. It's not like a Cessna where it's draggy and it scrubs off speed in the float. It'll float all day if you carry too much speed. And there have been times where I come in and I start floating and I realize I'm fast, and my option is force it onto the ground and scrub my brakes off and my tires and get it stopped, or just go around and do it again. Ego should not come into this. You shouldn't say, oh, what will people think? They're watching, I screwed up or land. Who cares? Just do what is safest. And if you're at the point where you are floating and you realize, by the time I land, I'm not happy with how hard I'm going to have to brake and how much runway is remaining. If I had a brake failure, what would happen? Just go around, do it again. There's no harm in going around and trying it again if it doesn't look exactly how you think it should look. This came on the last video where I went up to Canada. I flew with my dad, and they said, how old was your dad when he stopped flying? I'm not 100% sure. He's now 87. So he was 87 when I showed you in that video there. So we went up together and he flew the plane around for a while, and he does great. He still flies just great as he's flown his entire life. I think when he quit flying, he was around 81, 82, somewhere around there. So not too long ago. So he's been flying 60-ish years, and he's flown just a mind-boggling number of different kinds of airplanes. This question, I think it was on the alternator failure flight. He says, what is the average amp power consumption during flight? 17 amps. That's, with everything on that I normally have. If I'm in cruise, the battery's topped up, and the plane's just chugging along in cruise flight, it's 17 amps. It's unfortunate the video of the wing removal was lost, but could you explain the steps you have to perform to accomplish this task? Sure. Yep. I really was not too thrilled that video footage got lost, but it's pretty simple. If you look here, the airplane has the canard. The canard can come off, as you saw in my inspection video. And then you have here the strakes, and you see these lines. That's what denotes the strakes from the wings, and then these are the wings outboard from here. So in order for the wings to come off, the first thing you have to do is disconnect, the cowl, top cowl comes off, disconnect the rudder and aileron cables and connections, basically control cables and push rods that control the control surfaces. Then there are holes in the top and the bottom that have inspection plates on that you pull off, and then on the bottom ones you would then disconnect the wires for the antenna that is built. There's a comm antenna in the vertical stabilizer, and there's also a light at the root of the winglet. So you disconnect those, and then there are 3 bolts, and one of them is inside. You get to it from the inside the cabin, and it's right back in here, and it's pointing this way. So you have one person holding the nut on the outside and one person inside reaching way back in there to undo it. And then there's 2 more here, one on top of the other, that bolts this wing into the wing spar that comes through the middle of the strake there. So 3 giant bolts that are about that thick around. And then as soon as those bolts are removed, this wing actually pulls off backwards like that, and that's it. And that's all it takes. Now, it does take a few people to actually hold the wing and make sure it doesn't get damaged, and you need something to set it on. But that's it. That's all it takes to take the wing off. And if you had 3 people there working, it's probably a 45-minute job, maybe, thereabouts. So, and the same to put it back on again. Are you really confident to make all of the repairs on your aircraft? Yep, I am. Next, okay, yeah. Within limits. If there was something going on with the engine where I am seeing bad compression, or I'm seeing bearing wear in the oil analysis, or something along those lines, technically, legally, I'm allowed to take apart that engine and deal with it. But am I going to do that? Hell no. I'm not an A&P. I am not familiar with the internals. Well, I am. I am familiar with the internals of the engine. I have 0 experience with the internals of the engine. I am not going to be pulling a cylinder off there. I'm not going to be reaming a valve. I might do that under the supervision of an A&P, but as as far as it comes to the internals of the engine, I know enough to know what to look for and to understand things that can go wrong. I understand all the principles behind them. I know all the problems you can have with the internal of the engine. External things like accessories and accessory drives and magnetos and exhaust, all that stuff. I have no problem doing that. But when it comes to the internals of the engine, there are things you can do. If you get it wrong, your engine's going to self-destruct or quit in flight. That's bad. And the engine is $50,000, $60,000. So I will relegate engine internal work to either an A&P or me supervised by an A&P. Anything else in the airplane, yeah, I have no problem doing that. Keep in mind, it's my butt in the airplane seat there, so I'm extremely careful when I do work on the airplane to make sure it is up to spec. And as I've mentioned in other videos, I've been doing this my entire life. My father's an A&P. I've worked with him on his airplanes. I've been around airplanes. I've done this kind of stuff my entire life, so it's not unfamiliar to me. And I do have all the manuals. I mean, I have the engine manual that I could actually technically tear down that engine and rebuild it because I have all the specs. I have the manuals for everything. So I can follow instructions, but like I said, with the engine, I'm not going to do that. Other stuff, yeah, I'll do avionics, electronic, all this stuff. I'll do that, no problem at all. What choices of fuel are generally available at airports? For instance, if you have an automobile fuel-based engine, is the right fuel available? So typically you will find 100 low lead and Jet A at airports, general aviation airports, and that's it. Once in a rare while, I'll come across one, they have an auto fuel pump there as well. It's really few and far between. When I was still at Columbia Airport, there was a gentleman there who had a Technim P2012 twin that had Rotaxes on it. And he had racing bottles, those big plastic jugs that they use to bring fuel to the racing track. And you just pour it, with a hose and you pour it in. So he would just bring those and he would go to the gas station and fill it up with non-ethanol fuel. And he would just carry that out to the airport and fuel his plane from it. Finding airports with automotive fuel, I'm sure there must be a website somewhere that shows it, but there are far and few between. That said, with a Rotax, you can get away with putting 100 low lead in it. It will run, but your oil change frequency goes way up because you're scavenging all that lead and crap out of the 100 low lead, and as a result, you need to, I think it's the oil change frequency in terms of hours, it's halved. So you have to go through a lot more oil. And there are additives you can add to 100 low lead to try to help scavenge that lead. Oh, and spark plugs as well. Spark plugs you're going to go through faster as well if you have leaded fuel in an engine meant for auto fuel. Next question, why is it that canards have issues in the rain? I heard you can't or should not fly along easy in the rain. So that is specifically the GU Canard, which was on the original Long Easy, and I believe it was on the Defiant. I know it was on the Very Easy. It was never on the Cozy. So the GU Canard that was used on those planes, they discovered that when it got contaminated with rain, it would lose a lot of lift. Bugs could also do it. Some research was done, and they came up with the Ronce Canard. I remember Ronce was his last name. I don't recall his first name. He was the designer of that airfoil canard for the Long Easy that mitigated that problem. And when the Cozy was created, right from the very beginning, it used that Ronce canard. So that problem has never affected the Cozy. I mean, there is a little bit, as you saw when I flew through Washington, D.C., and I flew through that little rainstorm just before I got into the pattern there. And I did have to trim back because I lost a little bit of lift in the rain. And then as soon as I exited the rain, I had to trim forward again because I gained that lift back. So there's a little bit of loss, but it's not like the Long Easy with the GU Canard. Can you fly the Cozy IFR? Yes. As long as it's IFR equipped. All the stuff that you need for IFR, the proper instrumentation, lights, all that stuff. And of course you have to be current. Can you do a video showing the deep stall? No. The deep stall is, so in a Cozy, when it stalls, the canard stalls first, and because the angle of attack and the angle of incidence on the canard is greater than the main wing, among other things, loading and so on. But the canard always stalls first. So when it stalls, it drops the nose. And then if you continue the stall inputs, it will then stall again, and it'll just do this. The main wing never stalls. because the main wing stalling is not recoverable in a Canard, or a Cozy at least. And that's what is called a deep stall. So if you were to load the airplane in aft CG outside the envelope, the Canard is now unloaded such that the Canard can actually continue flying when you exceed the critical angle of attack of the main wing. And the main wing stalls while the Canard remains flying. The airplane does this and now just comes down flat like that. That's a deep stall. You can't recover from that. You basically just land vertically like this. And so that's why I'm not going to demonstrate that. No, because deep stalling a Cozy means you're crashing your Cozy. It has happened on a number of occasions, and there have been people who have survived, who have walked away, because when it's coming down like this, it's got enough surface area that it's actually coming down at about 30 miles, 35 miles per hour vertically, which is in some cases survivable. You're going to have some back injuries, but you aren't going to die in most cases. There's been a couple people that did that primarily because of aft loading or other things that they did that were not recommended or stupid. But they managed to deep stall their Canard, and no, some walked away, some didn't. How does the airplane slip? Well, just like any other airplane. It says, can you dump altitude pretty well? No, it slips just like any other airplane. A slip is where you would say bank it like this and then yaw it like this. And the reason you do that is because now you're presenting more of the side of the fuselage in the airplane and the control surfaces to the oncoming wind. It creates a lot of drag. And now that you're creating a lot of drag, is because you're coming down crooked like this, it causes the airplane to come down faster without speeding up. So if you find yourself high on final approach, if you just push the nose over, well, what's going to happen is you're going to accelerate. And by the time you get to the runway, you're going to be going so fast that you can't land. So instead, you do what's called a slip, like this, and it burns off some altitude without increasing your speed too much. And it's a way of fixing a problem that you had, that you set up with a bad approach. You came up too fast or too high, or both. So can you slip it? Yeah, just like any other plane, it slips just like any other airplane. Can you dump altitude pretty well? No. It's not like a Cherokee. You slip a Cherokee, it's coming down like a brick. You slip this, it comes down a little bit faster, but it's still pretty slick and aerodynamic, and it does not like coming down. That was a nice flight with great cruise speed. I think that was the flight, this was a question on the flight going to Maine. What are your power settings and fuel flow? What engine is installed? Power settings in cruise, it depends on altitude. How I normally have it set is I will have the throttle wide open and I will modulate power with mixture. And because I'm running lean at peak, I will get up to altitude, and of course I'm climbing up with full throttle. And mixture, I'll modulate the mixture and bring it back slowly as I climb in order to balance between fuel flow, correct mixture ratio, and cylinder head temperatures. And then when I get to cruise speed, I will accelerate, and then I will do a big pull all the way back lean of peak, which means you watch the exhaust gas temperature until it rises, until it peaks, and that's where the engine is developing the maximum power for that altitude and for that mixture. And then I'll keep pulling beyond that until the exhaust gas temperature starts falling. And then once I've seen that, then I'll push it back up till I'm about 30 to 50 degrees lean of peak. That is the best fuel economy for this airplane. It's not quite as fast as it possibly can go. If I run it right at peak, I can get 168 knots true, thereabouts. I'll use a lot more fuel. So having it just lean of peak, I will, depending on altitude, I can usually cruise 9,500, 10,000 feet. I'm around 160 knots and about 7.5 to 8 gallons per hour, thereabouts. The engine inside the airplane is an IO360. And it's a Aerosport, which is basically a rebadged Lycoming. So it's a Lycoming IO360. All right, this is from someone who also watches my synthesizer channels. What is more complicated, a studio full of synthesizers or flying an airplane? Flying an airplane, 100%. Synthesizers, if there's something you've forgotten, just look up the manual or you can figure it out. Airplane, you can't really do that. You can't be on an instrument approach and like, geez, how do I work this again? So yeah, there's a ton of stuff you got to memorize. You just got to have it. Yes, there are checklists, but there's so much knowledge you got to have. and there's a lot that is perishable skills. I guess playing synthesizers, playing piano, that also is a perishable skill. You have to keep practicing it, but just like that, airplanes, particularly instrument flight, is a perishable skill. You have to keep doing it in order to maintain proficiency in it. Have you thought about going to a constant speed prop? I would love to, but the benefits and trade-offs are not worth it. So a constant speed prop is a prop where you can adjust the pitch of the propeller so that on the ground you can adjust it so it's more of a fine pitch, so the engine gets right up to full 2700 RPM red line and it develops maximum power for takeoff. And then once you get up at cruise altitude, you can adjust it so that the engine is going at maybe 2100 RPM, and it does that by adjusting the coarseness of the prop to make it more coarse, so it takes more of a bite of the air, and that gives you better fuel efficiency and overall efficiency at altitude. It's a great thing. However, the problem is that constant speed props are heavy. They're generally, most cases are metal, but the hub and the mechanism that does all that stuff is right in the hub of the propeller, and it's heavy. And that is the absolute worst place you can hang extra heavy stuff on this airplane, because if you put heavier things on the tip here, that means now you've got to add extra ballast in the nose to offset it. Now you've reduced the overall load by both the weight of your extra ballast and the weight of the constant speed prop. And those people that have done constant speed props on Cozys only see marginal improvements, and it's definitely not really worth the extra expense and cost of adding a constant speed prop. The other thing is, constant speed props are really freaking expensive, and if you look at a Cozy, it's at the back. So when you have your nose gear down, every little pebble and thing that gets kicked up by your nose wheel is going to go right up through that expensive prop. And when I say expensive, we're talking like $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. And all it takes is one good rock in there and you can take out a prop. So it's generally not done. Not saying that there aren't some. There are some Cozys that people have put constant speed props on, but it's generally not, the cost benefit is not worth it. I hear you talking about a VASI. What is a VASI? A VASI is a visual approach slope indicator. PAPI is similar, precision approach slope indicator. They are lights. You'll see red and white lights to the runway when you're coming in, and depending on what type it is, you'll see 2 or 4 lights in a specific pattern, and they change color depending on what your angle is. So if you're coming into land and you're way too high, then you'll see all white lights. I'm talking about a PAPI here, which has 4 in a row. As you come down farther, now you have 2 white and 2 red. That means you're on the proper approach slope. If you get down lower, you get 3 red and 1 white, and if you get down way too low, now you see 4 red, and that's telling you 4 red, you're dead. That's basically what that is it's a indication to you of where you are in the glide slope. Not so, I guess it's useful in the daytime, but at nighttime it's particularly useful where you have less visual cues as to where you are in relation to the airport, particularly if the runway is on a hill or it's up and down, and that can throw off your perception of what your approach angle is. And so by having those lights there, it tells you exactly where you are, and as long as you have the red and white lights properly set and you follow that in, you'll end up right at the threshold of the runway at the correct place. What's the reason for parking backwards? I guess you've heard me talk about parking backwards a few times. That's simply because if you look at a typical plane, they're small at the back and big at the front, and that's where the tie downs are for here and here, and then one at the back. And on my airplane, it's the other way around. So if I want to tie down into a parking spot, I have to park backwards, because where the main wings on a typical airplane are at the front, mine are at the back. So in order for them to line up where the tie down rings are on the ground, I have to park backwards. All right, I got a lot of questions like, why don't you cut your hair? I'm like, fine, I cut my hair. And then now I get, why did you cut your hair? Can't win. I cut my hair because I felt like cutting my hair. I got sick of it. All right, where did you find your Cozy model, my model that I keep showing here? I've got quite a few people that want to buy this, and unfortunately this is not a model you can buy. This was a handmade model that was given to me by Daryl, the original builder and owner of my airplane. I'm not quite sure who built it, but it is a hand-built, one-of-a-kind model, and I'm really thrilled that Daryl gave it to me, and it gets a lot of use in these videos, and I love this model. Last question: how did you learn to talk so good on the radio? I didn't know that I talk so good on the radio, but a lot of people seem to have problems with the radio. They don't know what to say. They key the mic up and then they stumble, and it really is very, very simple. All you have to do when you're transmitting on the radio is say, who are you talking to, who you are, and what are you doing or what do you want? That's it. So if I'm calling up Cleveland Approach, I'll say, Cleveland Approach, Cozy 797 Delta Lima, VFR request. That's it. Follow those 3 rules and you will ace every radio call. And if they respond to you, then you respond back to them and do the same thing again. If they say, come back, okay, go ahead with your VFR request, and they say, Cleveland Approach, Cozy 797 Delta Lima, like flight following to Niagara Falls, I'm type experimental Cozy, I want 9,500 feet. That's it, that's all. They need to know type, destination, altitude. And they will then come back and give you the flight following. So, I mean, if you hear, I say, who am I calling? And who am I? And what do I want? When you're in an uncontrolled airport, it's almost exactly the same thing. You're calling up, you say, Medina traffic. Who am I calling? I'm calling the other traffic around me. So that's who I'm talking to. I'm not talking to Unicom on the ground, I'm talking to the other airplanes in the area at this airport. Medina traffic, Cozy 797 Delta Lima, turning left downwind, runway 27. And sometimes I'll say full stop. And then at the end, I will say Medina. So, and there's a reason for that, is that there are multiple airports in the area that have that use the same CTAF, or Common Traffic Advisory Frequency. So if you say Medina traffic, Cozy 797 Delta Lima, turning left downwind, runway 27, Medina, and somebody heard that and they only tuned into it after you started talking partway through, and they're like, oh wait, he's 27? I'm on downwind for 27. But then they'll hear at the end, Medina, and they're like, oh, yeah, different airport. So then it prevents confusion of that sort. Now, the one thing I hear people do is they'll say, Medina traffic, Cozy 797 Delta Lima, turning left downwind, runway 27, Medina traffic. Why do you say traffic? You're talking about the airport. You're no longer addressing the people up in the air. So don't say traffic at the end of your CTAF call. So Medina traffic, November 12345, left base, runway 27, Medina. That's it. So, and that allows people to talk briefly and succinctly and tell you exactly where they are, and other people doing hopefully the same thing and let you know. There's some controversy of whether you say, full stop. I will typically say full stop if there's other people in the traffic pattern, simply because that lets them know that, hey, I'm going to take a little extra time on the runway getting off the runway, as opposed to if I'm saying touch and go. If I say left base 27, touch and go. That lets people behind me know, hey, he's going to be down and off the runway, so I don't have to spread out or extend my downwind to make clearance for him. I can stay in fairly close because he's going to be gone long before I get there. So that's just being courteous. It's a bit of courtesy and being helpful. The other thing I will say is the one thing you never, ever want to say on the radio is Medina traffic, November 123, 10 miles to the south, any traffic in the area, please advise. I hear this not all the time, not as much as you used to. You hear it a lot in southern states for some reason. And it'll be more like, Macon traffic, this is Skyhawk, 4137, about 6 miles south of the field, any traffic in the area, please advise. And they usually are talking slow like that, and it's like a marker. As soon as you hear any traffic in the area, please advise, you know it's somebody who is kind of a clueless, low-skill pilot. That phrase, that specific phrase, any traffic in the area, please advise, is the only phrase in the FAA Airman Information Manual that is specifically called out as being prohibited and not to be used under any circumstance. Yet people still use it. And the reason why they prohibit it is because you have all these airports on multiple frequencies. Who is he calling to? Now, all these people are going to be like, am I in the area there? Should I be responding? And the thing is, it's lazy, but it's also unsafe, because virtually every time I've heard someone use this, any traffic in the area, please advise, Nobody responds. Nobody. So he's going in there thinking, oh, there's no traffic. I'm fine. I don't have to listen to the radio. I'm just going to blast my way in there and land. It's stupid, and it's careless, and it's not safe. So don't use that phrase. There is a reason why it's prohibited in the Airman's Information Manual. That's it. That's all the questions I'm going to answer on this video. This one went really long. I hope this is of some interest and entertainment to some of you. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments section below. And if you have any corrections, especially, do that as well. If you like this video, click like and subscribe to the channel. Really helps me out when you do that. Thanks for watching.